today's show, I'd like to give a very special welcome, and this is Bash from Crits for Cats. And Bash is a very special guest because he wanted to come onto the show when I put a shout out looking for new guests. So, first of all, welcome, Bash.
Hello, Fiona. Thank you so much for having me today.
It's a pleasure. Now, would you like to firstly start by telling everybody a little bit about who you are and your history, where you come from, and what it is that you do?
Sure. My name's not Bash, but it's what I go by on the internet. I've been going by Bash for so long that I don't really respond to my normal name anymore. So Bash it is. Um, I started rescuing cats just on my own. Um, oh gosh, like 5 or 6 years ago, I found my first one, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And eventually, started partnering with a local rescue, and started fostering for them because I was realizing that I couldn't place all these cats by myself, and I was ending up with more cats than I needed to have. So um, I kind of got a varied background. I don't have any veterinary background, but I have animal care experience. For the last 15 years or so, I've been working with racehorses.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get a lot of like hands-on animal care experience that way, just practical first aid and minor veterinary care and things like that, which I found a lot of that information can transfer pretty easily to cats. So, but I grew up with as a dog person. Didn't come into cats, until I found my first one, which I will talk about.
And what is it that you do with working with horses?
So I work with racehorses at a equine therapy center. It's like a sports medicine center for racehorse athletes. They can come if they need some time off and rest and recuperate. We have world-class new age therapies like a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, saltwater cold therapy. It's a lot of the same things that professional athletes use to recover from sports injuries, but giant sized for racehorses.
And how did you get into that profession? Because it seems quite unique and special.
It's pretty cool. I was very lucky to work at the training facility where the equine therapy center is located. I was working for a different trainer, just doing a normal racehorse job, grooming and being a foreman for the barn, and then had some life changes and wanted to do a little bit of a change of pace, and so start working at the therapy center instead.
Okay, so now you said you've not really been a cat person for your whole life, and as far as I understand, this is a cat journey that started by chance with a cat called Sushi. Would you like to tell us about Sushi?
Yes, my Sushi, she's my spoiled baby princess. So I had grown up with dogs my whole life. My dad is wildly allergic to cats, so we never had any cats. Didn't have a lot of interaction with cats. My ex had two cats when I lived with them, but they were nice to have, but they weren't like my cats. And so when I finally moved out here to Maryland, I was working at the barn, and we had some barn kittens come in, and I was like, oh, they're so cute. Maybe I'll adopt one. Maybe, maybe not. Um, and one day I was driving home from work, and I saw this little kitten running along the side of the freeway. And I thought it was a squirrel. It was so small. So I looked, and it wasn't a squirrel. I was like, no. I pulled over the car as fast as I could. I ran out in the middle of the road, and she ran under some bushes. And finally, I was almost ready to give up, and she started crying. And I'm like, just keep crying, baby. Just keep crying. And finally, I found her, and I intended to just take her back to the barn, um, and put her with these other kittens, but they were much older than she was. So I put her by herself and came to feed her the next morning, and she climbed up on my shoulder and went to sleep. I'm
Oh,
like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is the kitten that I meant to adopt. And so I adopted her. I changed my whole life around to accommodate her because where I was living, I couldn't have cats. So I found some place to live where I could bring the kitten, and that was the beginning of a lifelong friendship. And from there, I learned to like really appreciate cats for what they are and what they can offer, and learn to understand that, people don't always understand cats in the way that they deserve to be understood. Um, and that was how I got started with cats.
And how many years ago was that?
That was 9 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, almost exactly. It was around this time of year that I found her.
And has she been healthy the whole time? Any problems she's had?
No, she's a really healthy girl. She doesn't really have too many issues. Once in a while, she gets the crystals in her urine if she's getting stressed by something, but she's so laid back. We've really only had one time where that was an issue. And it was right after we moved into a new house, so things were a little topsy-turvy for her. But other than that, she's a very easygoing girl.
So she's the
She,
one who paved the way for you now.
yes, yes. After Sushi, it was about 6 months. No, I guess about a year later that I found Peanut, and he was starving in the parking lot of a grocery store, crying his little head off. Someone had obviously dumped him, and he had no idea how to survive outside. There was a colony of cats, of community cats, behind the grocery store, but it's very clear that he wasn't part of that colony. He was
Mm-hmm.
very, very distressed about being outside. So took him home, intended to find him a home with the shelter, but it had been the weekend of Christmas, and so they weren't open. So I'm like, well, I'll just keep you here for a few days, give you food and shelter. And then he and Sushi got hit it off really well. And I'm like, well, now you have a friend, and Sushi doesn't have to be alone the whole time. So I kept Peanut. Um, and then I guess it was about 2 years later that I found Smidge. He was in a storm drain up at a racetrack when I was visiting to race a horse there. I found him up in a little bitty, tiny 5-week-old kitten in a storm drain. Asked around the racetrack, which was full of feral cats. Like, has anyone seen this kitten's mom? Any other orange kittens like this one, so I could reunite him with his family. Nobody had seen any kittens that size. So I said, okay, come home with me and we'll find you a home. Didn't find him a home. And he took really well to my wife. And so my wife was like, we should keep this one too. I'm like, oh no, okay. I was like, three's enough. Three's enough. Eventually, three was enough for quite some time. And then in 2019, I was driving to work and there was a kitten that someone threw out of their car
Oh.
right in front of me. It wasn't the car in front, but it must have been the car just before. And so I stopped and picked her up, and she came home with us and stayed in the house. Had the worst flea infestation I had ever seen. So neglected, but so sweet and friendly. Like, was clearly somebody's cat that they just threw away. It boggled my mind. I'll never understand, people, and how cruel they can be. Um, so we took her home. We're intending to find her a home, but I didn't have any rescue resources at the time. So it was really just me trying to home cats. But she was too smart. Um, I told my wife, after I cleaned her up and got the fleas off of her, do you want to go meet the kitten so we can socialize this little kitten? It's good for her to meet other people. And she said, okay. So she came up here to this room, which at the time was just a spare room. And she sat down, and this was Shumai. And Shumai crawled in her lap, went to sleep, and I didn't see them again for an hour. And I'm like, this kitten knows how to stay in this house. She knows who she needs to suck up to. And so that was that. And that was our fourth and final cat for a long time. A long time, I say with air quotes. Because wouldn't you know it, the following year, the first week after I got done having COVID, I got a call that some kittens got dumped on their property. And we have a lot of that around here because we're pretty rural. And so there's a lot of farmland, and people will just, put cats wherever they want to put cats and never see them again. So they're like, we found this kitten. I'm super allergic. There was no shelter very close to these people because again, we're pretty far away from everything. So the closest animal shelter is like an hour. And at that time, I was working with the rescue, and they knew it, and they're like, "Do you think you could get this kitten into fostering?" I'm like, "Sure." So I went down and I got the kitten, and got her into the foster program, and everything was going smooth. But she started to show some really wild behavior issues and they weren't non-social behavior. They weren't aggression. It wasn't like she was mean. She was very sweet and friendly, but she's extremely food motivated, obsessed with food. And like you'd be sitting there trying to have a snack or make lunch, and she'd throw herself across the room into your plate and like trying to knock the plate out of your hands, things like that. And general kitten mischief. But with the food stuff, I was like, if we adopt this kitten out, she's gonna come back.
Yeah.
Without a lot of training and patience and someone who understands this behavior and how to change it, she's just gonna come back, or worse, she'll be dumped again. So we kind of sat down and we talked about it. And we're like, is 5 cats too many cats? Is that the crazy cat people amount? But we kind of had to go, the responsible thing is to keep this kitten here where she's not going to be bounced around from shelter to shelter or sit in an adoption facility forever or come back and forth 4 or 5 times, So that was Wasabi, and we still have her. And it was fine. It turns out to be fine because even though, despite all of my training and trying, she's still crazy food motivated. She loves the foster babies. She's been our little foster babysitter. So all the little new fosters that we get really do well with Wasabi, and they start to be social, and she grooms them and plays with them and kind of shows them the ropes. So she's been a benefit, but that is the absolute last cat.
I'll ask you in a few months.
Yeah, no. No, it's kind of like the very famous Hannah Shaw kitten lady says, goodbye is the goal. If you start stockpiling cats, you don't have room to save the next cat. And so with Wasabi, she was kind of a very special condition. And if she had been a normal kitten and hadn't been absolutely insane, she would have been adopted very, very quickly and very happily. There have been many, many kittens that have come through that I would have kept before I kept Wasabi. if I didn't have the scruples, but it is much more rewarding to see them get adopted into their own homes than just stay and clutter up my house.
Is she still crazy about food now, or is she calmed down a little? She is.
No, she's worse. It's terrible. It's just, oh man, she's such a nightmare child. I love her so much, but she needs to go on Jackson Galaxy's show. And we've tried so many like clicker training and puzzle toys and positive rewards and just so many different techniques for combating this very hardwired drive of hers. But so far she's just really likes to take your food. So.
It's funny how she's adapted the role of sort of looking after the little fosters, which is quite sweet, really, isn't it?
I really think it's because she's never known any other life. Like all my other cats came into our lives before I started fostering, and so all the new kittens are kind of like intruders every time we get new fosters. But for Wasabi, it's just normal because she's always been in the room with the fosters, because I had 2 others at the same time I had her. And then they go and then new ones come and new friends, it's just her everyday normal. So she's very well adapted to the situation.
Now, you are an advocate for fostering, and you say that fostering saves lives. Why is that so, and what can people do to help?
So fostering saves lives is absolutely true. When you think about if you're fostering for a shelter, then you're giving up space for a shelter to take in another cat who might need help, who might need life-saving treatment, who might need space out of an open intake shelter. Um, even if you're sheltering, or excuse me, if you're fostering for an open intake shelter, that's again one more cat that they can save that isn't taking up space, so they'd have to maybe turn another cat away, or cram cats on top of cats on top of cats. Like, so many shelters are just so overcrowded. And not only that, when you foster, you're giving cats the real life experience of living in a home instead of being in a shelter cage, or a kennel. They're getting all that experience of sounds and interactions of people coming in and out, deliveries, like all the everyday traffic of a home life, they're getting socialized and getting experience with. So you're really not only helping the cats get out of a tough situation, you're getting them the tools that they need to be adoptable. So as far as how anybody can foster, not I don't want to say anybody, because of course there are always going to be people who have limitations because of landlords or because of their living situation. But most people, even if you don't think, oh, I can't have a cat running or loose in my house. If you have a spare bedroom, a spare bathroom, you don't need a lot of space to foster, especially tinies. You get the little kittens, they don't need a ton of room. And you don't have to have them forever.
Do you think people are sometimes scared to try fostering?
Yeah, I think there can be some stigma around fostering because, so many people like to promote the foster fail, where they think, oh gosh, I'm just going to fall in love with this animal. I'm not going to be able to give it up. How could you do it? It would break my heart, to have this little animal for just a few minutes and then have to give it up. And so people are sometimes afraid of, I think, like the emotional toll of fostering. But I think that the reward of helping an animal find their forever home can be so much, can outweigh that. Like, it is hard to say goodbye, especially with the ones that you really grow attached to and have a special bond with. They're the ones you've been through a lot. Like if you've nursed a really sick one back to health, and you kind of become that cat's whole world. And you kind of think, how can I send this cat off to a whole new experience? That can be tough to overcome sometimes. But in the end, knowing that they have a chance at a great life that they wouldn't have had without you, that makes it worth it.
How do you deal with the emotional side of that? Because I can imagine that, there'll be some that you don't grow so attached to, but those ones that you do, how do you cope with it, having to say goodbye? Because it must be like sending your child to go and live with somebody else and thinking, are they going to care for them the way I do or love them enough?
It can be tough, but like a lot of it is trust in rescue. And not just for the people who foster, but for the rescue themselves, like the people who run the rescue. You have to trust so much. You have to trust your fosters that they're going to do the right thing by your cats. You have to, as a foster, you have to trust that you're sending your kittens out with all the best toolkit that they have to be good citizens in their new homes. And you have to trust that the people who you're adopting to, who you've done your best to vet and background check and get a feel for, you have to trust they're really the people that they say they are, and that your kittens are going out into a good home. It is tough. It's a lot of faith that you have to have. But in the end, the 1 out of 100 times that it's a bad situation that you didn't know, that you couldn't prepare for, the 99 times it's a happy ending. And the best thing that helps me is getting updates about my former fosters. It doesn't happen that often because we're not, internet celebrities here. We're not famous. And so like our cats aren't followed by hundreds of thousands of people, and they don't have a lot of incentive to send updates. But once in a while you get some, and that makes it like to remind you why you're doing this. You see your little babies in their own home with their own family, just having the best time of their lives, and you're like, yes, this is the reason. And that gives you the motivation to do the next one and the next one and the next one.
I guess when the people do eventually adopt, they don't realise sometimes that there is somebody working behind the scenes that have given them that little start in life that they needed, that to them it's maybe not so important to keep somebody else updated because they see that cat as their cat now. But,
Yeah.
you know,
And that's fine. They have every right. It is their cat now. They should,
yeah.
you know. Sometimes I think it's better to not get, you can get attached while you have them, but to let that cat go and have its own life, because you have 12 more that need your attention and your focus and your time and your love. Um, and they're not your cats anymore, and that's fine. That's the point, you know. So it doesn't ever bother me that I don't get updates about specific cats, like, but it's always nice when I do. It's just like the little cherry on top, you know.
Now, how much involvement do the shelters have, and how supportive are they with fosterers?
It depends on your shelter, but my shelter, Four Paws, which is basically just run by two ladies, with way too many cats and not enough time on their hands. My God, these ladies are amazing. Um, they bend over backwards for me, and all the fosters, you know, with anything that we need. I try not to bother my foster or my shelter people too much. I try to do a little bit more independently because I know that they have so much going on at any one time. But if I ever need anything, if I need meds, if I need food, if I need litter, um, if my kittens need to see the vet on an emergency, like, all I have to do is send a text and they'll make it happen, which has been absolutely 100% invaluable. I could not do this without them. And plus, you know, all the adoptions are facilitated through the shelter. If it was just me, I'd run out of people to ask about who wants kittens a long time ago, you know? So they give me a whole network of support and people to connect to get these cats adopted and placed into new homes.
So can you tell me a little bit about Four Paws Rescue?
Sure. So Four Paws Rescue was actually started in South Carolina. Yes, South Carolina, by a couple, and they used to live up here in Maryland, but they moved to South Carolina and run the rescue out of there. But here, the two ladies in charge of the rescue are Deb and Donna. And we mostly service the tri-state Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Delaware area. We don't do the whole state. We just kind of do our corners. You know, those three states meet and we do that corner of the three states. We're not the only rescue here. Thankfully, we also have some partnerships with some other rescues where if we are overfull on cats, we can kind of send out to other rescues who might need cats for adoption, especially this time of year as Christmas ramps up. We start to see a lot of people wanting cats and kittens. It's great that we adopt a lot of cats and kittens this time of year, but please don't get cats as pets for Christmas presents. They are lifelong commitments. That's a whole nother situation. As far as Four Paws goes, we do our adoptions out of a local PetSmart, and then up in PA, Pennsylvania, there's a little pet store that we do our adoptions out of too, called Pets and Friends.
And do you take your fosters there once they're ready for adoption?
Yep.
Yeah.
Most of my fosters end up going to the PetSmart, which is thankfully like 10 minutes from my house, so I can just drop in and check on them and help volunteer to like clean kennels and things like that if they need help. And then sometimes if I have little kittens, they tend to go to Jennersville because we do more tiny kittens out of Jennersville. It's a smaller store and they don't really have the space for adult cats. So.
And how long do they tend to stay there waiting to be adopted, or is it quick turnaround for them?
The kittens go faster. It's always kittens, you know, people love kittens. They tend to be anywhere from a week to a month usually. We don't have like sometimes, you'll get a cat who for whatever reason, we have such a small local area that, we need to have that cat see a broader audience, and we'll put them up on Pet Finder too. So, and if they're not getting adopted very quickly out of the store, then they go up on Pet Finder so more people can see them, so that they don't just sit in the store for months on end.
And do you tend to only have kittens, or have you had any elderly cats that have come to you?
Right, this year has just been like kitten craze. Last year I had a couple of older adult cats. And I didn't haven't had any elderly cats come through yet. But I've had a couple older guys who were former ferals who came to be socialized and rehabbed, and those were really rewarding too, to see like those shy guys come out of their shell and learn to be indoor cats and like realize the good life is being petted and pampered every day.
Sometimes it's more difficult for them to find homes as well, and depending on where it is, some of these shelters, they have time limits as well on these elderly
Hmm.
ones, so it is very important that they have a chance.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Kittens is easy to adopt kittens, but the real one, like you get those real old souls, who come in who've seen so much and have been through so much. Um, and to see them work through that trauma and like their trepidation and blossom, that's so rewarding. I love working with older cats, like, one at a time, not too many.
And what's it like there with regards to feral cats? Is there a lot on the streets? What are people doing for sterilization? Are they helping colonies there?
So we have, because we are so rural, there is a pretty healthy feral cat population, just kind of pockets here, there, and everywhere. Um, and they get out into like the farmland and, behind the grocery stores and things like that. Um, both grocery stores that I go to actually have colony cats living behind them that people have TNR'd and taken care of. There is a um, very dedicated TNR scene here locally. They don't always have the resources that they need to tackle the rural area though, because they're so spread out. But as far as like in towns and things, they do a really good job.
And are Four Paws involved in any of these campaigns?
Yes. Yep, we do TNR through Four Paws. Every week we have cats going to TNR either at the local SPCA or through our partner vet. We do TNR 3 days a week,
Mm-hmm.
and we're always full. Whether it's foster kittens, filling up our extra TNR spots, or actual like colony cats that we trap. Um, we do more trapping in the wintertime just because we can focus our attention more there as our rescue goes. Because during the summer months, we've just been inundated with kittens this year, kind of like everybody, kind of the rebound effect from last year and COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we do a lot of TNR trapping in the wintertime when we can settle down and really get out there and focus on these colony cats. And that's a good time to do it too, because they're all a little bit more motivated to come to the food that's put out, and they don't have quite so many resources for themselves, and they kind of congregate in one place.
And what are the living conditions like for the strays and ferals there with regards to the weather, and what's it like?
We're pretty lucky here in Maryland. We have a pretty temperate climate. It does get very cold in the winter, but it doesn't get like Minnesota cold or Canada cold. And in the summer it gets hot and humid, but it's not a desert. So we have um, all four seasons and some extremes at both ends. But for the most part, it's very easy for our colony cats to survive, which is sometimes very good for the colony cats, but sometimes hard for the colony cat management, because if you're not on top of the TNR, colonies can explode very quickly because they have such good survival rates, due to the climate and abundance of prey and food and things like that.
Now, how long have you been fostering for, and what was it that actually made you go to a shelter and offer you services?
So I have been officially fostering for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'd had a couple of cats that I placed by myself before that we fostered, but it wasn't, it was just kind of I found this cat, it needs a home. Do you need a cat? So, but for fostering, I was working and someone at the barn had a mama cat who wasn't fixed and had kittens, and they're like, I don't know what to do with these kittens. You have cats. Do you know about cats? Do you know anybody, who needs cats? And I'm like, I can take them. Let me take them. It was it was close to the end of the year, and they were going to move because every winter a lot of racehorse barns pack up from here and they move to south to the warmer climates, and everybody who works with them goes with them. And I was one of those people who don't because I live here. I have a permanent house, and my wife would get real mad if I left for 6 months every year. So I'm like, let me take your kittens so I can find them homes and you don't have to worry about them. So I had 6 kittens, and I just realized, how am I going to find homes for 6 kittens? And I went to the local PetSmart because I knew they had adoptions there. And there was an adoption event going on, and I met with Donna. And I'm like, Donna, I have these kittens, and I really want to foster them because I know that the shelters are always so full. The local open intake shelter told me that I couldn't foster for them. I had to surrender them. And I'm like, well, that's silly. There's no room. Why won't you just let me foster them? And then when they're ready, I bring them and get them adopted. So I'm like, all right, let me try this rescue because they're a private rescue. And she was so on board with that idea. She's like, we love fosters. That would be awesome. You should totally do that. We'll give you everything you need. You tell us what the kittens' names are and give us some pictures. And when they're ready for spay and neuter, you let us know and we'll get them done. And that was the beginning. And I have rarely had a foster not in my house since then for the last 2 years.
So, how many do you normally have at one time then? How many can you take?
That's a very loaded question. Um, Normally I have 1 or 2 at a time, or a litter, of 4 or 5 at a time. But for some reason, this year has been extra crazy, and people have started to figure out that I do cat rescue, and not just foster. Like, I do rescue on my own, because I don't know, I just can't say no. People say, I have this cat and it needs help. Can you help me? And I'm like, I can, you know. And I've gotten a little bit better about saying no lately because it's been so crazy. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 fosters right now. It's too many. It's too many. It's just too many for one person, at one time with limited resources. The rescue is great, but they're a small rescue and they don't have a lot of funding coming in. So everyone's resources get a little bit stretched, and it gets to be a little overwhelming. So 9 is as many as I want, and I would like less.
And how old are these ones now?
So they range from 6 months to 8 weeks.
Wow.
And the ones that are 6 months old, I've actually had since they were 4 weeks old, but they kept running into some different medical problems and having to stick around. Either they had ringworm and they weren't ready to go to the store because you can't take ringworm into the store for obvious reasons, or they had upper respiratory, or they got ringworm again from each other. So for whatever reason, they've stuck around. They were finally in the store. They were ready to go and get adopted. And then I got a call on Wednesday night that one of them was very sick. So I raced over there and brought her and her sister, because they're bonded, back to my house. to get them well again and where they could recover in a familiar environment. And that
Mm-hmm.
seems to be helping. That she's doing much, much better today. She actually scooted on out of here a little bit ago. She wanted to go play. So yeah, so then I had two other fosters that I actually had sent on, and I was happy to have sent them on. They were supposed to go on transport to one of our partner shelters in Baltimore, who service a much bigger area. And they were so fear aggressive that they were rejected, which was
Oh.
so strange because they're so sweet. All they want to do is sit in your lap and cuddle and purr, and they act like normal socialized kittens in my house. But when they got into a scary situation, they kind of reverted a little bit to their feral instincts and were just too feral. So they're going to get a little more socialization. We're going to do a little bit of training and positive associations with kennels and crates and things like that. So hopefully the next time they can actually go get adopted.
How difficult is that when that happens, knowing that they're one way when they're with you and then they're in a strange environment and they do revert back to being feral? Does it happen a lot?
This is the first time that it's happened for me. And I hadn't had these guys that long to be, they were not feral. They were dumped on somebody's farm, and I got called to come out. And they were very scared when I first got them, but they warmed up so fast, and they act like perfectly normal socialized kittens. They're fine with other people. They're fine with the dogs. So it was a little bit strange. I kind of wondered if they would be okay in a shelter environment, knowing their history. And then, of course, when they told me that we couldn't take them, I was like, oh, that makes sense, because that's how they were when I got them. They were very fear aggressive. They had bit the lady that found them, but she kind of handled them very roughly. And so I went in with that knowledge that they were capable of biting. And I got hissed at a few times when I was starting with them, but they came around so fast, and now, they're cuddly little lab cats. And so, knowing their history, I wasn't really surprised because I had wondered if that would happen with this particular case. But it's still disappointing and frustrating because you want them to go be successful, and you feel like you're doing everything that you can because
Mm-hmm.
they're showing you all the right signs. But then it's always scary, like a new situation, lots of strange smells, new people, getting poked, because they had to get tested for FIV and FELV. And they don't like getting poked with needles by strangers in a strange place. Eh, it can happen. Hopefully next time they'll do better.
Do you think sometimes it's about just giving them a little bit more time to settle?
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, sometimes in like a busy shelter environment, you don't always have that time, which is where fostering is so
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm.
If they had been able to go from me to another foster with that rescue, that would have been more beneficial for them. I think have a little decompression time, but they were going to go right into an adoption center, busy store, lots of people, lots of different hands and
Mm-hmm.
smells. So it wouldn't have been a good situation for them. So it was right for the rescue to say, no, we can't take these right now. Try again in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So
You do all you can to help them.
you do what you can, you try to set them up for
Yeah.
success, but sometimes, they have other ideas.
Yeah. Maybe they just don't want to leave.
I wouldn't want to leave. Why would you want to leave my place? It's like cat heaven.
Now, you had one feral that you did foster, and her name was Lily.
Yes, I had Lily. She was a friend of mine who lives out in the country in the middle of nowhere. Had this cat turn up at her house, and she can't keep cats because she has an aggressive dog. He's nice, but he's not nice to cats.
Mm-hmm.
So she was like, "Can you help get Lily fostered?" And I'm like, "Sure." She needs a lot of socialization, so she came to live with me and a couple other ferals that needed socialization. And she was doing okay. She was doing really well. Um, excuse me. She was pretty clear after some time that she was never going to be an indoor pet, though. She would let you pet her, but she never really loved it. And when she was done, she was done. She let you know that's enough. She didn't really ever warm up to being a cuddly cat who wanted to be a lap cat. She just kind of wanted to be fed and then left to herself. So eventually, she went to the rescue, to the home of Deb, who has like a cat room with a lot of cats. And she's like, maybe if we put her in this cat house with a bunch of social cats, maybe she'll come around. And she really didn't.